essentially what it is a soldier's pastor. It's a person that joins the soldiers and the members of the armed forces, wherever they may be on the planet, and is actually a member of the armed forces, and preaches to them and supplies them with whatever spiritual needs they may be. So, as I was on that path, I was struggling specifically on what branch God wanted me to be in. For any of you that are familiar with the armed forces, we have the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Army, and the Air Force. Well, I knew I wasn't going to be a Marine because, I may be strong, but I'm not really that good at push-ups. I'm not good at yelling either. Marine joke for those out there. I'm sorry, Sean. And I knew I didn't want to be in the Air Force, predominantly because, well, the Air Force has a pretty high GPA standard. Personally, I believe I'm a smart kid, but maybe not smart enough to fly planes. So eventually I narrowed it down to the Army and the Navy. I've always been a natural swimmer as a child. I always loved running. So I chose the Navy at first because I talked to a Navy recruiter and he gave me a pretty good story. So I spent the time trying to find what's called an NROTC unit. If anyone's familiar with ROTC, it's Reserve Officers Training Corps. It's one of the largest suppliers of officers to the United States Armed Forces today, aside from the service academies. And to be a chaplain, you had to be an officer. So I spent a boatload of time not consulting God in the least bit trying to find an NROTC unit. All colleges usually offer ROTC units, which is AROTC, Army ROTC, but not many colleges offer NROTC units. And I found a bunch of colleges that couldn't give me the degree path that I wanted, and I was wondering what the problem was. And I found one select detail that was supplying me with the most trouble in that. I wasn't consulting God. I spent that entire time looking for an NROTC college, only to find that I couldn't find one because that's not where God wanted me to. And I'm proud to say right now, I'm a member of Charlie Company, Army ROTC at Olivet Nazarene University. So, obviously you can see that something worked out there on the God side of things. So what we're going to be teaching tonight is Exodus 3:11 through 13. Thank you. And then we're going to go off my story. With God, there's no limit to what you can do. And I'll be sharing that with you tonight. So let's start with an overview of the scripture. If you could pull that up. So Exodus 3:11 through 13. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this very mountain." Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" Now, if you know the backstory of Moses, he was a very, very uncertain man. Moses spent the majority of his life growing up in the kingdom of Egypt. Moses was actually culturally an Israelite, so he was a member of the Jewish nation. Moses was born to a Jewish mother and a Jewish father. The Bible doesn't say much about what happened to Moses' father, but what it does say is at the time, the Egyptians were actually killing all firstborn sons of Israelite mothers. Now, Moses just happened to be born at that time. And this will actually come up because that was a prophecy that was prophesied to the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh. So, what Moses' mother did was to protect him, was she put him in a basket and let him go down the river. This was a very harrowing experience for a mother, especially because I know from my mother that you love your kid a lot. So it was probably pretty stressful to put your baby into one of the most crocodile-infested rivers in the entire planet and float him down in a wicker basket with almost no protection. But trusting in God, he was eventually found by the daughter of the Egyptian pharaoh, and she raised him as one of his own, eventually becoming the chief of architecture in Egypt. Now, Moses was categorically looking like an Israelite. He looked like a Jewish man. The Egyptians knew this, but because of his upbringing, they didn't do anything about it, so Moses wasn't subjected to the same kind of treatment that his brothers and sisters, the slaves in Egypt, were at the time. And as you look at it, as Moses is growing up, he always feels something weird. Whether or not he was made for a purpose, he doesn't know. So, one day as Moses was walking down the street, he saw one of the Egyptian slaveholders mercilessly beating one of the Jewish slaves. And Moses eventually got so angry with the slaveholder to the point that he ended up killing him. And because of that, Moses had to flee the nation of Egypt. Now, Moses spent months and months and years in the desert, and eventually meeting a tribe near around what is now known as Mount Sinai. In the verse, "You will worship me on this very mountain." So when Moses met this tribe that's around Mount Sinai, he ended up starting a family and having a wife and actually having a pretty good life as a goat herder. But God had different plans. God chose Moses, a goat herder, one of the lowest rings on the Jewish ladder of power, to lead his entire nation out of Egypt. And we'll go into this. But we're just going to focus on this verse right now. Now, when Janice and I went over this verse, we took three main ideas from it. So, the story of Moses helps us understand the context of why God may choose us for certain things. So, we got three main points from it. We believe that God creates us with purpose. We trust that God is with us always. And we know that God sends us for a certain purpose. So let's go into belief. For that, I have a video introducing Jack Kovach. Some of you may know him. Talking about believing and why God has created you for a purpose.
My name is Jack Kovach. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a senior at Naperville Central. And I believe that God created everyone with a purpose, and that this is really evident through Moses' story. But I think that sometimes in your everyday life, it's really hard to remember who you are and that God created you with a purpose. And I think one of the biggest things that this is affected by is like who you hang out with and who you're around. Because all the things that people say to you, you take in, and those help shape the voices that you hear in your own head. And you have to know sometimes who to listen to. And then, like lately I've had a job, so I haven't been at church a lot. And I realized that you have to go looking for things, and that God will always just reveal himself to you. And one of those things that helped me a lot is coming to church whenever I can, even though I can't that much. And that even just being a part of the youth group helps a lot, and it's really easy to take it for granted. And that the biggest thing everyone can do as Christians is to just build each other up, like it says in 1 Thessalonians. Hi guys, my name is Jack Kovach. For those of you that don't know me,
So, unfortunately, Jack can't be with us tonight, but I appreciate him in video form. I like how he went to 1 Thessalonians, if you don't mind pulling that up real quick. So in 1 Thessalonians it says, "Therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact what you are doing." So what God does is he supplies us with a community of people that each have individual purposes to help us find out our individual purpose. And I think that's the key part of believing in the purpose that God has made for you. In my life as a child, I was kind of soft-spoken, and obviously I'm not anymore, so I have that going for me. But I didn't really believe that because of the mistakes that I made that I could preach in front of a select amount of people about what he wants out of all of us. So I liked in the video how he talked about 1 Thessalonians, encouraging one another. By encouraging one another, we give God glory. We allow the power of God to speak through us into others and to allow us to raise each other up. I also like the fact that by building each other up, we're using the gifts that God has given some of us. I believe that God has given me the gift of preaching, of of evangelism, of spreading his word. And I like the fact that by me doing that, I'm allowing some of you to reach into your lives and to find the purpose that you have determined for yourself. So, now we're going to move on to trust. So, if I could have Paige up here to share a personal story about her trust in God, I'll let you guys listen to that.
Woo! Yeah,
You have to do the mute? Trent, go show her how to unmute.
Okay, I'll just talk really loud. It's not a problem for me. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is trusting God. And some of you maybe heard my testimony through Delta, and I talked about how I went through. Whoa, there we go. So I talked about how I went through a couple of surgeries. The third one that I went through, it was kind of hard for me because I'd just been through another one with my arm, actually, because they thought it was cancer. Did the surgery. It was just a benign tumor. But that doctor left in 7 metal clips, and he never told us, so that resulted in having another surgery. Now this surgery, I thought, I'm gonna kill it. Like, I'm done. I've done it like, 2 times with the third one. No, it didn't work like that. So I was in the hospital bed in the really nice gown they gave you, hooked up to this IV, and then I just started crying, and my mom's like, Paige, like, what, you got this, like, why are you crying? And I'm like, I'm scared. And I didn't even think of talking to God and listening to see what he had to say to me. I was just selfish and thinking of myself and how this would affect me. And my mom, she grabbed my hand, she looked me in the eye, and she said, Paige, you have gone through so much. You got this. She goes, you know what? You got to trust in God. He is the one. You are in his hands right now. You have to trust him. You know what? After that, it was like something came over me. I didn't even know it was God. It was God. My heart rate went from infinity to peace. I put my life in his hands. The doctors, they got the rest of the IV in my arm. I laid down, went into that surgery. You gotta trust in God. If you don't have trust in God, you just have a normal life of fear. You just gotta put all your trust in God. And things, well, for me, they worked out pretty well. So, I have another story. I got a lot of stories in my life. So, all right, here's another time. When, this time though, it was just that God, oh wait, am I supposed to tell the story up front? Trent! Trent! Am I supposed to tell another story?
Not now. Wait till the third point.
Yeah, just skip about that later.
I like Paige's first story. So what I like what Paige said was his presence is power. And if you go to Matthew 14:28 through 29 in the Bible, you'll find several instances of God using people that didn't expect to be used by God, being used by him. So in Matthew, it's, Lord, if it is you, Peter replied, tell me to come with you to the water. Come, said Jesus. And Peter got down out of the boat and walked to the water with Jesus. Now, if you look into the backstory of Peter, Peter has always been an unfaithful kind of man. And I think what Peter experienced in that point is something like what Paige experienced. They were in a storm on a boat in the middle of a lake where no one could hear them. Very tiny boat, something like a dinghy. And I can imagine right when Jesus walked up in the middle of that storm, their heartbeats going from infinity to 0. Now, if you look at what Jesus did right then, was he was using a clear instance of his power. So when you pray for God's power, just ask that he gives you some kind of sign. And for all people, it might be different, just like your purposes. But when you have stress or anxiety, just pray for calm. And that's usually a good way to release your stress up to the Lord. God never really made for our human bodies to handle stress alone. You could just look at it from the biology of how we're made. The brain kind of fills up itself with different kinds of thoughts that make it even worse stress, and our heartbeat kicks up, which isn't really necessarily good for our sweat glands, and kind of just goes all downhill from there. So God makes it out for us. He allows us to release our anxiety up to him and take our heartbeat from infinity to zero. Now, moving on to our last point, it's knowing that God sends us. And this is where Paige is going to share the second part of her story. And I'll let her do that.
Okay. It's working? Yeah, okay, good. All right. Messed up my notes. Okay, that's cool. Bear with me, girl. Okay, here we go, I got it. All right, guys. Okay, so, all right, so this next story that I'm going to tell you about is about a couple years back. It was about when I started developing my anxiety and my depression, and so it got to the point where I didn't hang out with any of my friends, locked myself in my room, watched, movie after movie, cried. I missed out on so many things, opportunities I could have went to and been a part of, but yet I stayed in my room. And so my mom, she's like, okay, this girl needs to do something with her life. So she took me to a doctor, the psychiatrist, I think that is. Not the one that described, okay, but. So, she took me to one, and we went through, I explained my whole situation to the doctor, and, she was great with me and everything, and then she goes, I think you need some exposure therapy. So exposure therapy is you're being exposed to your fear. Yeah, great, right? Yeah. So, I was like, in the doctor's office, I played pool. I was like, okay, sure. Got in the car, Mom, I'm not doing it. It's like, nope, not doing it. She's like, Paige, come on, you have to. I'm like, Mom, I'm not doing it. I was crying, because who wants to be exposed to their fear? I mean, no. So, kept crying. She was like, Paige, come on. You've done everything else in your life. This is just another journey. You're strong enough. You can do it. Took a good day of convincing me. I finally went. I sat on that couch, held my mother's hand like a 5-year-old, and cried the entire time it happened. But God was with me through all of it. My mom wasn't the only one holding my hand. He was right beside me, holding the other. He put that in my life so that I can go out and have, normal interactions with people. I can go out and hang out with my friends. I don't have to stay inside and cry. He made that happen so that I can function normally. I mean, he believes in who I am. He believed in me when I was sitting on that couch. If I didn't have my mom or God with me, I could still be sitting in my room watching, I don't know, like The Wizard of Oz or something. But, we believe that God is calling us and he is believing in us. We're not alone. And anything that you guys are going through right now, you think you're the only one going through this? Yeah, you in the white shirt back there, blonde hair? Yeah, that's right, you. All right? I want you to know, you are not alone. You're not going to fight this battle alone. Whether it's, acing a test, That's never gonna happen to me. But anyways,